I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
The Secretary General welcomed the announcement of a 2-week ceasefire by the United States and Iran.
Signs of diplomatic progress in the Middle East. But concerns remain on the ground as attacks continue in the face of a ceasefire. Reflecting on a dark chapter, the UN pauses to reflect on the Rwandan genocide. Innovative solutions. A look at how one UNESCO World Heritage site is finding unique ways to battle pollution. Next.
The Secretary General welcomed the announcement of a 2-week ceasefire by the United States and Iran. He calls on all the parties to the current conflict in the Middle East to comply with their obligations under international law and to abide by the terms of the ceasefire in order to pave the way toward a lasting and comprehensive peace in the region.
For more than a month, conflict has roiled the Middle East. Word of a ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran came Tuesday, but questions remain. Wednesday, new attacks were reported in Iran and Lebanon. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz in response. The tenuous ceasefire comes on the heels of a failed UN Security Council resolution calling for coordinated efforts to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. Mitch McCann has more on this week's headlines from the UN.
Tuesday's resolution was put forward by Bahrain on behalf of its country and a number of Gulf states, which were demanding that the Strait of Hormuz be kept open following weeks of conflict in the region. The waterway is vital, as about 1/5 of the world's oil typically flows through it. Its effective closure has caused big swings in oil prices. The resolution encouraged states that use the Strait of Hormuz to coordinate defensive efforts to ensure that it remains open. It also demanded that Iran immediately cease all attacks against merchant and commercial vessels. Although Bahrain and other Gulf states had initially hoped for a resolution authorizing the use of force, the language was watered down to gain more support amid concerns from Russia and China.
The draft resolution before you does not create a new reality. It rather constitutes a serious response to a pattern of reoccurring hostile Iranian behavior that must cease.
Despite pleas from Bahrain's foreign minister, China and Russia determined that the resolution failed to provide clear context for the conflict and did not address the fact that the United States and Israel started it.
The fundamental solution to ensuring safe passage of ships through the strait is to achieve cessation of hostilities and of fighting as soon as possible. The U.S. and Israel are the instigators of this conflict. The fundamental reason for the disruption of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz is the illegal military actions taken by Israel and the United States against Iran.
Meanwhile, Iran's permanent representative criticized a social media post President Trump made on Monday night ahead of the ceasefire, in which he wrote that a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again.
The President of the United States shamelessly and brazenly issues threats to destroy all civilian infrastructure in Iran, including bridge, power plants, and energy facilities, by setting a deadline, and openly reveals this intent to commit war crimes and crime against humanity.
On Wednesday, the Security Council was briefed on the protection of civilians in armed conflict. The UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator, Tom Fletcher, told members that the total number of humanitarians killed in the last 3 years has exceeded 1,000.
Of those over 1,000 deaths, more than 560 were in Gaza and the West Bank, 130 in Sudan, 60 in South Sudan, 25 in Ukraine, and 25 in DRC. That number, over 1,000, compares to 377 recorded as killed globally over the previous 3 years. So that's almost tripling the death count.
Mr. Fletcher told the Council that too often humanitarians are being killed by UN member states. He said they are not only being killed, but their work is being restricted and staff are being harassed. Mr. Fletcher urged the Council to uphold resolutions protecting humanitarians. Mitch McCann, CGTN, at the United Nations in New York.
Displacement is driving rising risks of infectious diseases, including measles, hepatitis A, and acute diarrheal diseases, particularly in overcrowded shelter situations. Children are disproportionately affected, making up around 1/3 of the displaced people, with tens of thousands already living in shelters under increasingly fragile conditions.
The wider conflict in the Middle East is fueling a displacement crisis. In Lebanon alone, fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has forced more than 1 million people from their homes. UN officials say there is also growing concern about mental health conditions for those impacted by the conflict. This week marks 32 years since the devastating genocide against the Tutsi people began in Rwanda. Hundreds of thousands were killed in a 3-month span.
It is our solemn duty to remember the victims, honor their resilience, and ensure that their stories are forever etched into our collective memory. By doing so, we not only pay tribute to those who suffered, but also lay the foundation for preventing such atrocities in the future.
A remembrance ceremony was held in the General Assembly chamber. Speakers called on all countries to become parties to the Genocide Convention. They also warned about dangerous rhetoric that can have tragic consequences.
The ancient toxins of racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, and anti-Muslim bigotry are once again corroding our political discourse. We hear outright denial. We hear distortion. We even hear the glorification of past genocides. The genocide against the Tutsi shows us where this path can lead, when words are weaponized and the world waits too long to respond. We must do more than remember the dead. We must protect the living by defending truth and rejecting narratives that make violence seem acceptable.
April 4th marked the International Day for Mine Awareness. Mines and other munitions pose a dangerous threat even long after conflicts have ended. On average, 1 person is killed by mines or other explosive devices every hour. In places like South Sudan, the UN's Mine Action Service is working to find and destroy mines and other munitions. The agency has destroyed more than 1.2 million explosive devices and more than 7 million small munitions.
International Day of Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action is not only a moment of reflection. It is also a commemoration of the victims of war and explosive ordnance as a lasting legacy of a conflict. It is a reminder that the explosive ordnance risk persists long after the fighting subsides, and the call for sustained collective effort to address those risks.
Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda. The remains of 3 UN peacekeepers killed in Lebanon were returned to their home country of Indonesia. They were killed in 2 separate incidents. Indonesia's president received the fallen peacekeepers with military honors. Gaza is still facing hunger issues. According to the World Food Program, about 1.6 million people are facing acute levels of food insecurity. That's about 77% of the population. Cuba recently received limited fuel shipments, but the country's energy crisis is still having a heavy humanitarian impact. The island has gone without sufficient fuel since a U.S.-imposed blockade began in January. This year, a key decision will be made in the halls of the UN. It's time to select a new Secretary General. Antonio Guterres is in the final year of his term. Gerald Tan has more on how his successor will be chosen.
Integrally, solemnly swear
to exercise in all loyalty, discretion, and conscience
the functions entrusted to me
as Secretary General of the United Nations,
to discharge these functions and regulate my conduct
with the interests of the United Nations only in view,
and not to seek or accept instructions
in regard to the performance of my duties from any government or other authority external to the organization.
The oath of office for Secretary General of the United Nations. All 9 men who've led the organization since its founding. Let's rewind that, shan't we? All 9 men. Yes, the United Nations has always had a male leader. So how were they chosen, and what might change this time around? On paper, the rules are succinctly laid out by Article 97 of the UN Charter. The Secretary General shall be appointed by the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. For the first 70 years, the selection was shrouded in secrecy. Closed-door negotiations at the Security Council were largely driven by the 5 permanent members who have veto power. That all changed in 2015 when calls for reforms led to a transparent process. For the first time, there was a public list of candidates. The 13 of them had to share vision statements and hold hearings at the General Assembly. Since then, even more rules have been introduced to guide the current selection. Candidates need to be nominated by a member state or a group of them. Each member state can nominate only 1 candidate, and candidates should disclose sources of funding related to their candidature. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The same resolution adopted by the General Assembly last September notes, quote, with regret that no woman has ever held the position of Secretary General, and encourages member states to strongly consider nominating women as candidates. There is also an unspoken rule related to geography. You see, the UN divides its 193 member states into regional groupings: Africa, Asia Pacific, Eastern Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as Western Europe, and this includes Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States. So far, 2 leaders have come from Africa, the same number from Asia Pacific. Western Europe has had the most, 4 in total, including the incumbent Antonio Guterres, and only 1 has hailed from Latin America, with none from Eastern Europe. Because of the rotating precedents, there is much speculation that the next leader of the UN will be from one of 2 regions, Eastern Europe or Latin America and the Caribbean. Many are also asking if this will finally be the moment for a Madame Secretary General. Regardless of gender or geography, there is consensus that the next leader, in keeping with the UN Charter, should embody the highest standards of efficiency, competence, and integrity. Gerald Tan, CGTN, Washington.
Coming up.
What we would value most is that UN and its leadership goes back to the basics in terms of impartiality and neutrality of the organization.
UN Insider.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments.
fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Russia plays a key role here at the UN. The country is one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. I sat down with the Russian Federation's Deputy Permanent Representative to the UN, Anna Istikneva. Ambassador, you've been in your current post for a little over 5 years now, and then you also spent 5 years in a different capacity at Russia's mission. China and Russia have stood together on the same side for many votes over the years, many years. Can you explain your alliance and your perspective for our international audience? And what unites the two of you, the two countries, when it comes to votes on the Council, regardless of what it seems to be?
Well, I think that a relationship between Russia and China is at its peak in history. So, and also since I first came here in the UN to work in 2011, I've never experienced any problems on coordinating our position with Chinese colleagues. We always stood side by side, and that came naturally because we have the same views on sovereign equality of states, of justice, of protecting the principles of the Charter, and a lot of things to name. Yeah, but it's these are good words. But when it comes to particular conflict, you somehow know that your Chinese colleagues have the same assessment of the situation. And I know that many countries in the UN who need help, who need support, they always know that they can come to Russia and China, and their situation will be reviewed in a balanced manner, and they can seek our support, and this support will be provided.
What are the medium to long-term prospects for the BRICS alliance, something that Russia and China work together on as well, as a result of the current war, though, between the United States and Israel and Iran?
This current escalation in the Middle East has a direct impact. 2 states are directly involved in this escalation, namely Iran and United Arab Emirates. So it's difficult to negotiate the joint reaction on what's going on. But there is a common spirit in BRICS, which is aimed at a similar assessment of the security threats, that BRICS members support each other's security, that it's equal, that everything should be resolved at the table, at negotiation table, in a dialogue, in a good faith. And so I think that there is a good prospect that BRICS can overcome this difference of approaches towards the situation. But the top priority is to de-escalate and to stop this conflict and to contribute to the ending of it.
Ambassador, we know that right now is an important time at the UN because there's the process underway to choose the next Secretary General, which the next leader obviously inherits everything that is happening right now, between the budget crises to the conflicts around the world, and also the growing humanitarian issues that don't seem to be getting any better. What kind of leader does the UN need right now?
I think it's the most discussed issue in the UN corridors these days, what kind of a leader we need for the organization. Because the organization is not in its perfect shape, and everyone knows it, and so everyone wants a leader that can take UN into the better future. And of course, we need an energetic person who has deep affection into the institution. That's clear. But this should be a person who also understands what was wrong in the past and what mistakes were made so that we find ourselves in this situation. So deep, thorough review is needed, and lessons learned should be drawn from what happened. What we would value most is that UN and its leadership goes back to the basics in terms of impartiality and neutrality of the organization.
Ambassador Anna Istagnieva, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
UN Insider.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
All you need to know about China. China 24, only on CGTN.
Pollution is creating a serious problem for one UNESCO World Heritage site. But efforts are underway to clean up these famed waterways with some innovative methods.
Nothing says Mexico quite as eloquently as a day spent boating on the canals of Xochimilco. Groups of friends or families hire colorful barges loaded with food and drink and while away the hours, serenaded by mariachi or norteño bands as they ply some of the 180 kilometers of canals in these ancient gardens. Carlos Ernesto Diaz's family has been running the barges, known as trajineras, for generations. His grandfather started the business. Today, he says, tourism is crucial to the families that live around the gardens, but he is worried that Xochimilco is in danger. Runoff from agricultural activity is polluting the waters, causing the growth of oxygen-choking algae. Mexico City uses huge amounts of water from Xochimilco, decreasing the level of the canals. And garbage from nearby neighborhoods is also a problem.
Unfortunately, the local people, those natives to Xochimilco,
still don't fully perceive the environmental issues that exist. Perhaps they become accustomed to the canals being dirty due to urban development. However, they are also not necessarily supportive of canal cleaning efforts. I mean, it's one of the many issues.
Es una de tantas problemáticas.
So when Dr. Refugio Rodriguez, a researcher at Mexico's Institute for Advanced Polytechnic Studies, came knocking on his door, he answered with curiosity. The researcher said she had come up with a new and effective way to oxygenate the waters of Xochimilco, which are polluted by the overuse of fertilizers, pesticides, and other contaminants in the thousands of acres of crop fields that dot the area. The oxygen forced into the water helps neutralize the effects of the chemicals.
We are talking about the water oxygenation process using micro-nanobubbles, which is the latest technology we have been developing here in Xochimilco. This is indeed applicable and has various uses, not only for oxygenating the water in the canals here in Xochimilco, but also for certain rivers and lakes.
She needed a cheap and efficient way to force millions of nanobubbles of oxygen into the contaminated waters of Xochimilco, and the party barges were an ideal solution. She asked Carlos if she and her students could install solar-powered generators on his boats that would discharge the oxygen nanobubbles into the water as they did their routine trips around the canals. He immediately agreed, recognizing that helping to clean the water would protect the gardens.
Around 5,000 families depend on tourism here in Xochimilco, and losing this area that is still a cultural heritage of humanity would be a loss, even as a hallmark. Losing the UNESCO Cultural Heritage seal would mean losing an economic influx that benefits many people. So we have to collaborate to rescue Xochimilco.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN insider.